Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody from across the world. We are pleased and delighted and excited and hopeful uh, uh, to speak with Akash Bakshi, the CEO of Ana Therapeutics, and also CEO, I assume, currently of YourChoice as well. So we are very excited to talk with him because his company that he sort of spawned off to specifically deal with this COVID-19 crisis is doing some very exciting work that obviously can help millions of people around the world. So we are really thrilled, delighted to have you with us on Pandemic Punditry, Akash.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I've been sort of looking at this, sort of drug that you've. Okay, let's start. I know a little bit more than maybe our viewers do. So let's take a little step back. Give us a little rundown of sort of your first company, the Y Combinator, YourChoice, and then sort of how you ended up at Ana Therapeutics and why. A little bit of background would be helpful.
Sure. So in 2018, one of my co-founders, Nadia, and I spun out a company called YourChoice Therapeutics from UC Berkeley. And there we were focused on developing non-hormonal contraceptives for men and women. Our idea very clearly was, I think if we look at it this way, men don't have very many contraceptive options beyond using a condom, right? And so those are what we call on-demand contraceptive options,
Okay.
such that it's in the moment that you use them.
Right.
And in fact, men are actually not great at using condoms. I know that this is not what this podcast or
totally
live stream was about, but like the overall concept of the company was, and still is, that men are not great at using condoms because even the use of the condom is kind of trouble laden, right? Where the idea is you're probably in the dark and you're perhaps inebriated, and if you use a condom properly, you should be erect, and so then you have to be erect, and now you're putting on the condom, and then really you're jumping over through a lot of steps just to actually do what you really wanted to do in the first place. So men are not great at this. And women, on the other hand, are left with options predominantly that, let's say, thinking about going to the club now is just such a foreign concept, and I wonder how the clubs and discos are going to open up again. But like, imagine if a woman met someone tonight and she wasn't on the pill 3 weeks ago. She doesn't have a lot of options for herself. And plus, hormonal contraceptives are not, they come with side effects. And so the idea was, can we develop something that's non-hormonal? Could we develop something that women could use that's on demand, that's discreet, that's highly effective? And I was so lucky that I was on this ride with Nadia, and we had another co-founder as well, but it was just so lucky because Nadia was one of the world's few sperm physiologists in the world. We were really cutting the edge on how to develop a male contraceptive, and along that path, we as a team had identified niclosamide as a potent sperm inhibitor.
Okay.
I think originally, though, my mind went to, I don't necessarily know. This is a repurposed drug. Can we use this, and will it ever be a male contraceptive? And no, it would not work as a male contraceptive, just because it couldn't. Yeah, you can't get it across the blood-testis barrier. So we're like, okay, well, what do we do with this molecule? It still seems potent, and I was really not that interested in moving it forward. I thought, well, this molecule will be good because we can get a new chemical entity out of it, and maybe we'll think of doing something with that.
Mm-hmm.
And my opinion of the molecule kind of changed when we began identifying that the molecule worked against HIV and HSV2.
Okay.
So if you have a molecule that's that potently inhibits sperm, and you could inhibit the replication of HIV and HSV2, the virus that causes genital herpes, kind of all of the lights go off.
Right.
That you can kind of immediately start thinking that, imagine this as a condom coating, where you could not only increase the efficacy of condoms, but you could also decrease the spread of STIs. Or a vaginal gel that could just be applied prior to having intercourse and having the same effect, right? And so that's really what we were commercializing. That's really what we were developing. And so that is the basis of the work that ultimately became Ana Therapeutics.
So let me pause you for a second there. So the niclosamide itself is an already sort of long existing drug that's been used in the past for, if I'm correct, is it tapeworm?
That's right.
Okay. So, and I just read on CNN about this woman who had tapeworm, a larvae cyst in her brain. So I was completely grossed out about that idea. But so this drug's been there for a very long time for the treatment of, and I guess it's in a pill form or something like that. Is that what it is? And you just take the pill.
Exactly. It's a chewable tablet. The way that Bayer had originally developed their formulation. So, you get tapeworms and you chew the pill and you, I think the recommendation was that you take it with some food. And the way it was originally developed is that because it's a locally acting formulation or a drug that they developed, that you swallow it, it'll come into contact with tapeworms in your gut and then it'll kill them off. And then you pass them along.
So this and you said your co-founder, she's an expert in, what was the term you used?
Sperm physiology.
Sperm physiology. Okay, all right, wow. So it's interesting what people become experts on. so
what's funny today is that her PhD was in infectious biology.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So to think that we had this as a core team when COVID was hitting, right? Wow. Because we knew about the antiviral properties of niclosamide, and then when I think we were in one Monday meeting, and at the time Andrew was an employee of YourChoice Therapeutics, and he just simply asked, like, does this work against SARS-CoV-2? And Nadia took it on as a real question where I was perhaps thinking of other things.
Right.
And she, yeah, it works. And, we started thinking, well, or at least I'll take a step back. Nadia said it works in SARS-CoV-1 and it works in MERS. And then we assessed that there was 86% homology between SARS and MERS and SARS-CoV-2.
Right.
And that the thought was that this could make sense for COVID-19.
So this sort of light bulb moment, sort of with Nadia saying, "Hey, this is work for previous iterations, a previous version of SARS, and then also of MERS, and so there could be some efficacy involved in against COVID-19." So that sort of the baseline was sort of set there. But then what is it that you had to do? You had to get FDA approval specifically for the use of niclosamide for COVID-19? Is that the process you're currently, or you got approval already for?
That's what we're obtaining approval for.
Okay.
Is the indication of the use of niclosamide to treat COVID-19. But at the time, we had to get approval from the FDA to be able to even kick off a clinical trial.
Okay.
So in that, the agency said, well, we need to see directly that this molecule works against SARS-CoV-2.
Okay.
And then we also had to, so we were not impressed, or we did not, I'll take another step back. Unlike in many other parts of the world, niclosamide, the chewable tablet, that Bayer originally developed, is not actively available. So it was originally available in 1982. It was originally approved for use in the United States in 1982. It was withdrawn from the market for marketing reasons in 1996.
Okay.
So no one in the United States can write a prescription for niclosamide.
Okay.
And so I even think at one point we tried to get the chewable tablet.
Okay.
And Bayer said, at this time, we're not going to do that. We thought, okay, well, then we had to make our own formulation. And that's actually what we had, because we had already been working on niclosamide, we already had access to a source, we already shipped it here, and then started developing our own formulation, realizing some of the concerns with how the original formulation may work in COVID-positive patients. So let's say, for example, you're intubated. How does a chewable tablet work?
Okay.
If you have a breathing tube in, how does a chewable tablet work?
Right.
For you? So thinking about how, in theory, you could, of course, use a mortar and pestle and put this down.
Right.
But the idea could also be that, could we develop a capsule? And instead of developing, 500 milligram chewable tablets, should we make smaller capsules so that it's easier to swallow for folks who might have challenge breathing?
Right.
And then also, since we're developing a new formulation, should we better assess molecules or excipients that allow for the drug to be more solubilized? And just thinking about really how we develop a program that's really effective for patients today.
So the niclosamide itself, so in the clinical trial, and in the work that you're currently doing with Ana Therapeutics, you're looking to sort of enhance sort of the delivery of the drug in terms of whether it's a capsule, a pill, the gram, the dosage, and all that. You're not actually sort of creating a new version of it, right? Or you are, because I guess you're trying to synthesize some molecules differently, I guess, to make it that way.
No, we're still using niclosamide itself. We did not decide to move to a salt or to some other near neighbor.
Okay.
The idea that we had was, and the concern that we had from the beginning was, you need something, especially since this disease spreads like smoke indoors, and also spreads, from person to person very easily. How do we think about developing something that you could take at home? And how do you take something early on in disease?
Okay.
And, I think from a societal point of view, it was something, how do we get something approved quickly? Because when we started our company, we started it on March 12th. That Thursday was when I remember our president stopped travel between Europe, which, was impacted us, because really, he actually even said cargo would not be traveled or transported from Europe and the United States. And actually, we had drug that needed to be transported from Europe to the United States during that time.
Okay.
I think the next week, he actually started chatting about hydroxychloroquine. And so here we are banging the drum saying, we think niclosamide is an effective antiviral. And folks are telling us this problem is going to go away. The president says hydroxychloroquine works. And so there you are using your brain thinking, okay, well, I see the papers that you're talking about, but I don't know. We should have more. All we could say is, I don't know whether this is going to work or not. I've seen the same paper, but we should have more shots on goal than just hydroxychloroquine.
Right.
And with that, we actually got some support. But then right after hydroxychloroquine came remdesivir. And people said, yeah, well, this is taken care of, right? We have remdesivir. Do we really need another antiviral? And I kept saying, I think we need something that you can take at home. and not something that's given in, in a hospital setting.
Yeah.
And, I think we continue to move forward at that stepwise process as we continue to highlight that the program had legs of its own, and we're super lucky to have obtained the investors that we had in our program, because at every step there, it was not I mean, I think everyone has hurdles, but I think I look back at this and I'm just like, these were not normal hurdles, right, to think of that. And so, yeah, and I think as we think about the program today, something that's can be taken on early in disease progression, right? Immediately when you get your COVID positive test, something that you can take at home while you're quarantining yourself, I think is still really important, and is something
Oh God, yeah.
that we offer. I think another consideration that I think is also a gem in the way that I think about niclosamide safety profile is also the fact that it's been used in children before.
I see.
Right, and so if we think it's safely been used in children before, and there are dosing regimens that can be used for children, and so if we think about how children are super spreaders, then I think that this is very important. And if, on the other hand, we think about, in particular in the United States, parents are often concerned about vaccinating their children, right? There's the concern that vaccination results in autism. And as there is a lot of work being done on vaccines, I wonder whether parents will be as open to having their children vaccinated against coronavirus as they will be to having themselves vaccinated.
Right.
But
Elon Musk himself has said he's not going to get a vaccine. So I mean, there's some very high profile people saying that.
Yeah, and so which is concerning. But
yes.
I think for children in particular, if children are not vaccinated with a highly effective vaccine, then this may mean that children will become susceptible to becoming COVID positive, which means we still need safe and effective treatments for children.
Sorry, Karthik, I've been hogging the airtime here. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hey, Akash. Because this is a drug that's already existing, what are the different types of risks you would face when you're in clinical trials?
Yeah, I would say that the risk profile is, somewhat mitigated, and that's actually one of the reasons why we didn't change the molecule, right? The idea is that niclosamide is available, all around the world, and so if we were able to show that this was safe and effective, then we could move forward with letting the world know and helping the world quickly move forward with a drug that is effective. And our view would be that, the formulation that we've developed is better, and you should use that. But I think in rural parts of India, if niclosamide is available, those folks would be able to have access to such a drug. So the safety profile of the drug is well established over the last 60 years. The adverse effects are also, somewhat well understood. Yeah, and I think, what's exciting is that folks have used this for so many various treatments. We've also seen that it's been used for nearly, in some patients, it's been used for 4 months with no safety issues.
And the drug was initially discovered and put into commercial, or to patient care how long ago?
I think it was started being used in the 60s.
Wow.
Yeah, if not, and it was approved in the United States in the 80s.
Okay. So it's been around for a long time. If there was significant adverse side effects, we would probably have discovered all of that by now. So in that sense, it's a really safe drug, right? Yeah.
I would like to think so. At least there's no data that has concerned us about the safety profile of the drug. The typical side effects are, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. But I think in respects of COVID, these are manageable problems compared to not being able to breathe. Yeah, and so the other thing that I think, there are two other things about niclosamide that I think really make it attractive for COVID-19 treatment. So I talked about how it is, how it's chewable, how it's something that, how it's something that can be taken orally, how
Right.
it's something that can be taken at home, so it's early in disease state. Um, so the other thing that I think is attractive is that niclosamide not only works as an antiviral, but it also shows the ability to be an anti-inflammatory.
Oh, okay.
So as we think about, I mean, I think we're still unclear how dexamethasone is working, but it
Right.
is also largely thought of as a potential anti-inflammatory.
Right.
But if we think that niclosamide is also an anti-inflammatory and one that's a non-hormonal anti-inflammatory,
Right.
I wonder to what extent that we can provide some kind of therapeutic benefit to patients earlier on by going after the inflammatory phase of the virus, in addition to the viral stage of this disease.
So that so interesting sort of I just thought of something that's really interesting. It seems like if you put niclosamide as well as dexamethasone, like whatever that's also an very old drug, right? So you have two very old drugs here that are actually seems highly effective at least at first glance. So what do you think, Akash? I mean, when we are confronted with a new sort of virus, um, it seems like the predisposition is to go out there and discover a new drug, as opposed to, and is that because there's a lot of money and big pharma money there? Is that why the inclination is to make a new drug as opposed to saying, hey, let's look at what we already have? And it seems, I mean, the more I speak with you, more likely that some of the old drugs. I mean, we're talking really old drugs. We're not even talking. We're talking really old drugs being highly effective. So I just that thought just came to mind. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if for pandemics, how I look at this is that the fastest way that we can go about combating the disease is to repurpose a drug, because if you were to develop a new chemical entity, the challenge would be, if you were to develop a new drug, the challenge is how do you assess all of the safety parameters for a new
Right.
drug and still be relevant
Mhm.
during the pandemic?
Mhm.
Right? I think remdesivir, we chat about this as a repurposed drug because it was originally developed for Ebola,
Right.
but it's now being repurposed and used for COVID-19. But much of the safety data had already been assessed, years ago. So the idea, this is why it's important for us to be ready to go into high gear if and when there's another pandemic.
Yep. Yep. So I think there was a question, right, Karthika?
Yeah, from Ritu. Thanks for joining us today, Ritu. So when can we hope to have this drug available in the market? Will you be looking at selling it in particular markets or worldwide? What is the pricing?
Yeah, so when do we see us being able to sell? I think in 2021 is a very aggressive, optimistic time. Early 2021 is our aggressive timeline
Mhm.
that we look to be able to begin marketing. And our focus so far had been in the United States, but I think that we will probably begin thinking about how to, at least for the preliminary trial that we're running, it's only being run in the United States. But I think for larger trials, it will be important to think about running such a trial worldwide.
So are you looking, I mean, just to interject, are you looking then for potential candidates? Let's say that Sri Lanka or India or Cuba or any of these other countries, if somebody puts up their hand and says, hey, look, I like to try that. Yeah. Are you open for something like that? Or are you looking for that or you're not?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Okay.
the thing is that the reason why our focus has been in the United States is just because that's where, I mean, up until this point, we have had the number one number of cases.
True.
And outside of the United States, it's hard for us to think of, the cases have been large in India, in Brazil, and in Russia, right? And so I think it was easy for us to say, well, I mean, we'll have patients in the United States, but I think yet Ritu brings up a good point, one that we've chatted about as well, is that how do we, upon showing safety and efficacy, think about, moving this drug more broadly? I think the other question here is, what is pricing?
Right.
And I think, we really started Ana Therapeutics. I'll take a line from my co-founder, Andrew, which is that we have a moral obligation to do something here, right? I think the idea is, and how I interpreted that is that we have to do something. If we had the opportunity to do something good, we must do something good. And I think that what we've shown is that even at low pricing, if this is an effective drug, this will make, oodles of money, right? I think that's what we have to show our investors as we try and move this program forward. And so I don't necessarily think that we should develop a drug that's cost prohibitive, given that it's typically those that are on the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder who are getting COVID-19. And the way healthcare works in the United States is that, if you aren't employed and don't have employer-based healthcare,
right,
you pay for care out of pocket. And so envision you're out of work, you've become COVID positive, and now you need to survive, and you're being straddled with, very big bills to fight off, this infection that you got, and no one's there to help you pay for it. I think it would be immoral, or it just would not give you a great feeling if you didn't at least make that drug available to those in need at a cost that is far more affordable.
Oh, that's very laudable sort of goal and objective, and we highly support that. It's interesting. It seems that I don't want to do a Donald Trump on you, but given that this may be available in other parts of the world for tapeworm, right? Could somebody just pop a pill? If they can find it? Is that? I don't want to put you on the spot and say, don't, that you advocate it, but if somebody has it or is COVID positive and this drug is available, are you doing something special to it to make it more effective, or can they just start chewing a tablet? Is there dangers in doing that?
We are doing something different than the chewable tablet.
Sure.
The chewable tablet is at least, as was described by Bear, is something that is meant to work topically. So by you chewing it and by it coming into contact with tapeworms in your gut, that's how the chewable tablet works.
Okay.
And while there is a reservoir of the virus in
your gut,
the gut and in the intestine, you also need to think about how you make this drug available in the lungs, which is where the virus may actively be replicating. So you need the drug to become systemically bioavailable.
Okay.
And then second, you also need to think about for some of the blood clotting portions, it has to get into the blood. Is something that
So you're doing something to it to be systemically bioavailable in your bloodstream. So it goes everywhere that COVID possibly could be.
Okay. That's our goal.
Okay, so that's your sort of secret sauce contribution, IP, whatever you want to call it, for this drug.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you look up niclosamide, you'll see that it is horribly it's not bioavailable.
Okay.
Right, and so it's not just that this is our secret sauce. It's also that this is what is making, or this is potentially what's making niclosamide effective. Changing it from something that is a molecule that works in the gut to one that turns it on to become available for the rest of the body.
Okay. So the caveat emperor here is that don't go and start chewing this if you're COVID positive. Wait for it to be officially released in a systemic bioavailable format.
Yes, I think that I think that, I think that we have to make sure that this is safe and effective in COVID positive patients, because I think, if there was something that I felt that I learned from the hydroxychloroquine situation, was that as we're watching, is that it did seem that first off, we increased the dose of hydroxychloroquine pretty high in COVID positive patients. And I think that was rationalized by saying, well, folks with rheumatoid arthritis are treated with this level of dose, and this is for a short period of time. But then we saw that there were in larger clinical trials, we saw that there were higher risks of mortality or morbidity in COVID positive patients. So you're seeing that this drug may not be that effective with patients, and so we need to be sure that the drug is safe before we start saying, yes, you should use this off-label.
Okay. And that's a part of the whole clinical trial and the work that you're doing. Okay,
that's
great.
Right.
Yeah, great. No, I just wanted to be, because I know we have a worldwide audience, and in some countries this will be available off the shelf. And I didn't want people going and popping the pill if they were diagnosed. Sorry, Kartika. Question?
No. Just wondering, am I correct in understanding that niclosamide has a low water solubility sort of index? And as such, it's difficult for it to be directly, sent to the lungs, like as an aerosol or as an inhaler?
So, it is low, it's purely water soluble. And, we had actually been working on solubilizing niclosamide for some time, especially since we were developing a vaginal gel. But we used that experience, much of what we learned from that experience to develop or look for excipients that made the drug more soluble. And that was actually one of the criteria that we used for identifying the drug that we ultimately moved into the clinic, or the formulation that we ultimately moved into the clinic.
So, just in terms of, so you're hoping that everything comes through, we get this drug, it gets, globally distributed, the investors get a return on their investment, and then you go back to your original mission, which was to create male and female contraceptives that are not non-hormonal.
That sounds great. Can we also add on to that I would like the world to go back to normal? I want to be able to go and meet up with my friends. I want to go to restaurants. I want to go back to seeing plays. Like, I just want life to go back to normal.
Right. So give us a little bit about your background. I mean, how did you sort of end up, being a part of this whole, this in the medical biochemistry, biomedical sort of field, doing this research and, starting your initial venture. What's the life story there? I mean, what inspired you to sort of get into this field?
What is the life story? I
know your family moved to Silicon Valley. So
that was a long time ago. My grandparents and parents moved in the 70s. I was born in the 80s. So they were just it's a different story. But I went to college at UC San Diego to study biochemistry and cell biology there.
Okay.
I have a close group of friends from there, and I think we're all surprised that we graduated from our undergraduate degree 10 years ago. It just doesn't feel like it was that recent.
Long
ago. Exactly, that long ago. And so I then went to go do my graduate work in molecular biology and biotechnology at the University of Queensland in Australia.
Okay.
And then came back to the United States and began working, at a few startups, and then ultimately found my way into IP licensing, first at UC Davis and then at UC Berkeley, which is where I met Nadia, and the rest is kind of history. And I did not start my career thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. But I think that if you look at, unfortunately, you have a sample size of 2 things that I've worked on, contraception and COVID. But I think what we think of as what motivates us to move a program forward, or what gets us excited about working on something, is that you have societal impact or positive impact on folks, right? So I think that that's what we kind of learned from, contraception is something that has not been necessarily innovated on for 50 years, but the idea is that if you could develop something so that you could decrease unplanned pregnancies, you could make a really positive impact, again, on people who are not in the best of financial states and don't want to have a pregnancy. And similarly, I think if we think about how we move forward for a COVID asset, I think that COVID is negatively impacting those that are on the bottom rung of society. And I think that they will not get access to the same type of care that, someone like our president has had access to, that gets an antibody cocktail plus remdesivir plus dexamethasone so early in disease. And so thinking about how we could develop something that becomes available everywhere, I think that that's something that we really think about.
Wonderful.
Do you sort of still have to go through I believe there are 4 phases in clinical trials. Do you still have to go through all 4 phases, or do you?
Yeah, so we do need to go through a phase 2 and then a phase 3 clinical trial.
Okay, and then you're done. Is it at that point? If it's
I think as I understand phase 4 is it's ensuring that there's safety upon its use post marketing, and I think that we also would intend to do that as well.
Okay.
And then you'd work with maybe the WHO to sort of disperse the drug, or?
Yeah, with I think that there are also other organizations that are looking to move forward repurposed drugs as well. Yeah, and so we got sidetracked when we were chatting about the anti-inflammatory properties of niclosamide. I don't know if I've mentioned that we also have data that shows that niclosamide is also potentially very potent as a prophylactic.
Oh.
So if what has been shown is pre-treatment of cells with niclosamide, and then you wash out the niclosamide and then infect with SARS-CoV-2, results in a drop in viral replication by 70%.
So it's got sort of 2 things. It's a antiviral potential sort of vaccine or immunity provider or barrier, prophylactic.
Right. So the idea is that if you had potentially been taking this and you come into close contact with someone who's COVID positive, maybe the likelihood that you progress to severe goes down.
Wow.
And I think that this is what we think is really the most interesting thing about our program. And so really that's why we're first looking to make sure that this is safe within COVID positive patients, and then move earlier in disease progression.
Okay. And the ingredients of the drug itself, these are not rare and exotic combinations, because I guess they've been around for a long time. So these are cheap. They are cheap to manufacture. Cheaper to manufacture than something that's using some kind of very convoluted bio gene editing kind of stuff.
Exactly. We had to find something that we could also scale up very quickly and effectively for this trial.
Okay. So it is obviously cheaper in terms of the raw material that goes into the actual manufacture of this drug. Okay. So what if you were, in terms of sort of, so if I was sort of, or the person listening was a member of the Indian government or a foreign government, who's kind of got millions of people potentially infected in Brazil or India or any of these other countries, what thought process should they be going through in order to sort of maybe get in touch with you, or if they were to sort of do a proper clinical trial, I mean, what would they need to have in order to sort of get that process started? Do you advise them to sort of, I mean, trial it in the first place and get a head start on it, given the population size that they would have to distribute this to?
Yeah, we would love to work with whoever is interested in moving this forward, and I think we could find a way to make access, to give access to the drug that we've developed,
Mm-hmm.
such that it is available to assess the safety and tolerability.
Great. Okay. Great.
Given that the drug acts as a prophylactic, does it make sense to have the clinical trials for the first responders, like the healthcare workers, because they're the ones who get exposed the most?
That's actually who we think of in terms of who we would love to make the drug available to, are these first responders. And the other thing is that, so we have started in looking at niclosamide in moderate patients, so patients who have been hospitalized but are not yet on a ventilator. But we are looking to move earlier into early disease. But then we are thinking of, from early disease, we can take one step back and go into what's called post-exposure prophylaxis, which is that you had a high-risk encounter, and within a short period of time, if we're able to quickly get you drug, then we make sure that if we do this, if we're able to treat you before you become COVID positive, that we can still prevent you from ultimately, being hospitalized or mortality as the two potential endpoints.
Right.
In a post-exposure prophylactic. And then from there, we could take one final step back and say we could do something potentially as a pre-exposure prophylactic. We have some ideas of particular patients that we would go after who are at high risk if they get COVID, and going about thinking about running a trial in those patients to make sure that they don't get COVID as a pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Wow. So given what you said on pandemic punditry, I'm just sort of blown away that I haven't read this on CNN and Washington Post, New York Times, and Fox News, and why do you think that is? I mean, I'm looking at what you're saying just now, and I'm saying, oh my God! I mean, how come more people are not excited and talking about and giving this a fair shake and expediting it? Am I sort of talking out of school here, or?
I mean, I think that these are some frustrations that we have as well, because we believe very strongly in the molecule that we're moving forward, and we definitely think that that this deserves as much of a fair shot as some of the other drugs that have been moved forward. I think what we don't have to our benefit is a large pharma partner who's putting behind us millions of dollars to even pay for marketing and to continue to fight to have our drug covered within the New York Times. And so, unfortunately, it is a bit about who you know. What I would say, though, on the contrary, is that clinicians have been very excited to run our trial. So those that, while you don't, and I don't think that, maybe I'm just the kind of person that I'm okay with not getting a lot of press or a lot of attention for what I'm doing from just the public, but at least if researchers, clinicians are all excited about running our trial, I think that in and of itself is sufficient to kind of just keep moving forward.
Wow.
Speaking of, I know earlier we covered the fact that it's an anti-inflammatory. Am I correct in assuming in our research we uncovered, Lavi and I, that it inhibits the secretion of cytokine and stops the cytokine storm that COVID positive patients?
So that's at least how we're thinking about this, is that this could potentially inhibit the release of the cytokine storm.
Okay, so in that sense, it can also be used to treat acute patients.
Potentially, yeah. And so I think that we think about how to run that trial in severe patients.
Wow. Wow. So this, I mean, from what I'm hearing, it's got it's got the prophylactic, it's got the anti-inflammatory, it's got the antiviral. It can be used on children. It can be used early stage of the disease. It can be used acute stage. Oh my God! I mean, this is already looking like a miracle drug to me, right? I mean, it's a panacea if there was any. I mean, God, you should be on CNN, right? So
we have a lot of shots. We have a lot of shots on goal.
wow, that's just amazing, Akash. I mean, I'm just blown away, and I mean, we'll do our best to, in our limited fashion, to get the word out. But yeah, this is just tremendously exciting to sort of sit here and listen to it. You know, we were trying to figure out whether you should fit in the marketing in a pandemic miniseries or innovations and innovators miniseries. We have two miniseries that we run, and we couldn't actually figure out where, because I think in a sense, the way you've sort of pivoted your company from, you know, being in, you know, in contraception to then COVID. I mean, yes, they both begin with C, but the similarities end there. You know, that itself is a feat. I mean, in the fact that you guys, I think one of your financial backers is the inventor of Gmail, if I'm correct, right? So
okay.
so he put some money in quickly to Ana Therapeutics to get this going. So I mean, it's sort of an interesting sort of case study on even for a, you know, a drug company or a company such as yours to quickly pivot to and radically pivot at that to for market forces and to meet a need. And also, of course, you know, it's an amazing story in itself from an innovations perspective or an innovative perspective.
So he was, I mean, I just have to say about Paul. Paul was our first check and was really the person who gave us the confidence or the ability to actually move forward our program. Right? I think if we came up with an idea and, you know, I think no one was there to fund it or to at least say, okay, order a drug so that you can be manufactured into pills, the company would not have been around. So we're super grateful for him taking a chance on us and believing in the mission that we had of doing something good for the world.
Wow. Well, I mean, thank you so much to him and to you and to Nadia and the team. I mean, I hope when the story of COVID is written that you get more than an honorable mention or a footnote, because I'm rooting for you. Karthika is rooting for you, I'm sure as well. You know, that this sort of sees the light of day in a positive manner, and the whole world's sort of waiting. I know we would like to get back to some semblance of normalcy, and I think it's interesting, right? So, you know, there's these three things that you talk about, right, which is sort of behavioral changes, which, you know, some people seem to have a hard time, things like wearing a mask and social distancing. You know, that's one way to sort of, you know, mitigate this. The other is to obviously get a vaccine, right? Seems to be the longer, more complicated shot from what I can tell. And then the other one is, well, if you get a cure or a treatment for it that, you know, essentially makes it, you know, less life-threatening, then again, you have a way to sort of mitigate and survive. And I think you've just shown that your product potentially has uses for two of those factors. And that in itself is an amazing development. So thank you so much. I'm sure you got a busy schedule on getting this on board. What is the best way for us to maybe connect people who may reach out to us and say, hey, how can I participate? How can I get the word out? Whatever the case may be. Should they go to your website and sort of contact you from filling out the form that's there, or?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, and we're anatherapeutics.com.
Ana Therapeutics.com. ANA, right? Like Ana the airline.
Well, it's ANA for Andrew, Nadia, and Akash.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah, so when we started, I mean, I think Andrew also gets a lot of credit because, I mean, he also has been just so critical in developing the formulation that we're ultimately moving forward. But if we as a team had not been there to just quickly move forward what we knew in contraception, apply this to coronavirus, I don't think we could have moved as quickly as we have. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's some poetic justice, right? So contraception is stopping replication or reproduction. So nothing better than contraception on a virus, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
Reproduction and replication. Exactly. So there is some poetic justice there.
Yeah.
So Karthik, any more questions or?
Just one more. I know they've entered clinical trials, and I think they'd mentioned it's a 7-day dose, and then patients will be monitored for 60 days.
That's right. Wow. These are all various sources that you're putting together to assess the safety. But yes, this is true.
Okay. So does that mean that after the 7-day dose, because it's a prophylactic, it sort of acts as it makes you immune for some period of time?
No. So we are saying what we're saying is that you treat for 7 days and then you look for safety and you look at outcomes 60 days after. On the 60th day, you look at what happened to that patient. Did they ultimately remain in the hospital? Were they discharged from the hospital? Did they die? Did they have breathing complications? Were there any complications, just to assess what happened to the patient on the drug versus placebo.
Okay. But your hope is really to make it available in the long term as an over-the-counter medication.
I haven't had thoughts about that so I don't know very many drugs that are available for infectious disease that are available over the counter. Yeah, at least in the United States, right? I think if we think about this, like no HIV drug is available just over the counter. And so I'm just a bit hesitant in saying that the view is to have this as an over-the-counter drug.
Yeah, but Akash was saying maybe it doesn't need hospitalization. So
yes.
Like you don't need, so you can take it at home while you're quarantined.
As an outpatient. Yeah.
That's absolutely the goal, is that this should be something that is available for outpatient.
Yeah. So it doesn't need any specialized skills or additional monitoring or drastic side effects to watch out for. If you're self-isolating at home, you can take it for 7 days and see what happens. Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Akash. It's been I don't know. I'm just blown away by what you've done, and our thanks to Andrew and Nadia as well for creating this opportunity for the rest of the world. I wish that Godspeed on getting it out very quickly. And we're all waiting, and we'll spread the word as much as we can. And it's great to hear something so positive. We like to get people from all over the world on our show. So for a couple of hours a week, we hear something hopeful, inspiring, or something that we can learn from. And you've certainly fit that bill on multiple fronts today. So we thank you for gracing Pandemic Punditry and giving us all a little bit more hope than we had when we first started out about an hour ago.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks again. You have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.